Hey everybody, and thanks for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. Leading up to Avengers Endgame, I'm looking back at all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies in preparation for the big event. If you'd like to join me for this journey, I welcome you to do so, and I'd love for you to do so we can talk about these movies together. With this video, we're kicking off Phase 2 of the MCU and ending the Iron Man trilogy with Iron Man 3. As always guys, I don't want you to just sit there and hear my thoughts and opinions, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. So be sure to comment your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section about what you think about Iron Man 3, and let's get a fun conversation going. With all that out of the way, let's talk about Iron Man 3. So Iron Man 3 is directed by Shane Black, taking over from Jon Favreau, and sees Robert Downey Jr. return once again as Tony Stark. Since the Avengers, the truth of not being alone in the universe has caused Tony to experience PTSD and panic attacks. When a new enemy in the Mandarin causes harm to Tony's friend Happy, Tony sets out on a vengeful quest to take the Mandarin down. So this movie is the first movie post-Avengers, and is the first to demonstrate the world after the events in the Avengers. The Avengers are really seen as like celebrities, and everyone's very curious about what went down with the Avengers and exactly what happened in New York. The world has now been exposed to alien creatures, and a lot of people want to find out more about this through Tony Stark. And the movie touches on that a little bit, not as much as I kind of would like it to, but I do like that aspect is there in some way. Also, this movie being post-Avengers really sets it apart from Iron Man 1 and 2. Iron Man 1 and 2 you could really watch as standalone movies that connect into each other. When you go to this movie, it's obvious that the Avengers is a gap there. The Avengers is the bridge that connects this movie to Iron Man 1 and 2. So if you watch Iron Man 1, 2, and 3 straight, you definitely feel like you've missed something if you haven't watched the Avengers. So this is really when the movies kind of became, you couldn't just pick a franchise you wanted to watch, you had to start watching the MCU as a whole to really understand what was happening in the standalone movies, because stuff from the big event crossover started to bleed into the solo movies of these characters. So I believe that this is one of Robert Downey Jr.'s best performances within the MCU. His performance in this movie is some of the most vulnerable Tony Stark that we get within the MCU. To see this character that's usually very self-confident, cocky, and arrogant about himself, having these anxiety attacks about what happened in the Avengers, and having this character deal with these anxiety attacks is really fascinating to watch because it's such a different Tony Stark than we're used to seeing. Also, it makes a bunch of sense. In the Avengers movie, they don't have time to focus on Tony Stark dealing with aliens and Thor being a god from Asgard. This is a lot for Tony to process in his mind. So when we see him in this movie, it's really messed with his head. He can't sleep. He's constantly tinkering and building and improving on his armor tech and building a bunch more suits and constantly working on the suits just to keep his mind occupied. I also like how much this movie demonstrates Tony Stark's mind and intelligence. This movie really strips Tony Stark down to the man. He doesn't really have a lot of his armor and his tech throughout most of this movie. He has to rely on all of his intellect to get things done. My favorite part of this movie is seeing Tony Stark do investigation work and detective work while he's trying to hunt down this Mandarin. At one point, Tony Stark goes into a home department store and just makes a bunch of weapons and explosive devices out of everyday household items. And I love seeing that because it really demonstrates the theme of this movie. That Tony Stark truly is Iron Man with or without the suit. It's all about his intellect, his brain, and how smart he is. That's his superpower. And I just really like watching the scenes where Tony Stark is stripped from his high tech and just having to figure out things and make things from scratch. And speaking of the Mandarin, I want to talk about him for a second. So Guy Pearce plays the character of Aldrich Killian, and as a villain, he's fine. He's technically revealed to be the Mandarin. I don't have that much bad things to say about his performance besides the fact that, yeah, he's a one-dimensional villain, and he does villain things. And the actor does fine with what he's given. He has some menacing moments, and he has some moments where you can tell this guy's not to be messed with. But his character really doesn't stand out, and he's not that memorable. But the Mandarin twist with Ben Kingsley being an actor and not actually the terrorist of the Mandarin, I'm gonna be honest, I really like it. I find it really funny, and every time that scene is revealed, I laugh out loud. Ben Kingsley, the way that he plays that character of Trevor, is so funny. He's so clueless. Because in the earlier part of the film where he's doing all the like terrorist clips and doing the monologue as the Mandarin, and you'll never see me coming, all that stuff is actually kind of eerie and creepy in some ways, and it kind of does have a real world vibe to it that makes it feel more authentic. But then when you see him as this goofy character, I just think it's really funny. And it's also a moment where it pumps some fun into the film. Up until that point, the film is actually very kind of serious. There's still some quips and comedic exchanges through the characters and with Tony Stark, of course. But they do kind of take this world of the terrorism, the PTSD, and the anxiety attacks that Tony Stark is dealing with very seriously in a real world way. But when you get to this Mandarin twist and Tony Stark gets there, all the tension kind of just eases out of the film, and it's one of the most fun scenes within this movie. And I'm not a comic book reader, so I can't speak on what the Mandarin's like in the comics, but in the movie, just speaking about this movie and my experience with this character in the movie, I thought it was really funny. I liked it. I had a lot of fun with it, and every time I see that scene, I laugh. Ben Kingsley is so funny in that scene, the way that he plays off Trevor. It's also really cool to see Gwyneth Paltrow get in on the action in this movie. In the final act of the film, when they're at that oil rig, and all of Tony's suits are flying around taking out all the bad guys, it's really cool to see Pepper Potts have a fight scene and actually be the one that ultimately takes down the bad guy of Aldrich Killian. Which is also really cool because near the end of the second act, Aldrich Killian kidnaps Pepper Potts and keeps her as like his trophy. So to see that character that was captured by this guy and treated as a damsel in distress actually be the one that ultimately takes down this guy is kind of cool, and I kind of like seeing that Pepper Potts get that empowerment. And going from Jon Favreau to Shane Black as the director in this movie really shows the difference of Iron Man 1 and 2 to this movie. Iron Man 1 and 2 feel completely different in tone to Iron Man 3 in a lot of ways. This movie has a lot more darker moments, it's got a lot more death in it, lots of innocents die in this movie. And the terrorism in this movie actually feels more real and more eerie and a little bit more disturbing than even Iron Man 1's terrorism did. And when you also go from Iron Man 1 and 2 to this movie, the villains in this movie come off as a little cartoony to me. I mean, not to say that there wasn't cartoony moments in Iron Man 1 and 2, but in this movie having the characters kind of mutated and have this like fire ability and heat ability, and at one point Guy Pearce breathes out fire as Aldrich Killian. And if you watch Iron Man 1, 2, and into this movie, that just feels a little bit weird for this world. Even the MCU in general, that feels a little weird. We've seen a lot of weird stuff in the MCU, and even more weird stuff even after this movie came out. I mean, we're gonna get to a movie where Talking Raccoon is one of the stars. But in this movie, Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian breathing out fire is kind of the weird moment where I go, okay, that feels a little off. That doesn't feel like it fits in this world. Which is kind of strange, but that's just how I felt about it. I was like, And even though there's comedic moments and comedic exchanges within this movie, sometimes they can feel a little off or inconsistent with the tone that's been set up thus far in the movie. But that being said, a lot of comedic moments and comedic exchanges in this movie I do laugh at, so that could be a negative or a positive depending on how you look at it. For me, it's a kind of a mixture. Some of it works for me, some of it doesn't, but for the majority, I would say that it does. Overall though, I do think Iron Man 3 is a good movie. It's definitely for me the second best of the Iron Man trilogy. And even with that being said, I do enjoy all three of these Iron Man films. But the one disadvantage about having the Avengers movies is that this trilogy does not work as a whole overall. Because with the Avengers movie smack dab in between Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3, you need to watch the Avengers movie to fully understand what's happening in Iron Man 3. Which I guess is a negative as this franchise as a trilogy, but since it's a part of the MCU as a whole franchise, as all these movies are basically one big franchise together, I guess it's not that much of a negative, because if you're not watching every movie in this franchise, then it's not really the movie's fault that you missed something because you didn't watch the previous movie before it. But like I said, this is definitely the second best of the Iron Man movies for me, and I definitely have a lot of fun with it, and I enjoy it. And I'm just glad that it is a part of this greater MCU, because luckily it wasn't the last time we got to see Robert Downey Jr. play Tony Stark in this universe. And with that, guys, we have ended the Iron Man trilogy. What was your favorite movie in the Iron Man trilogy? Was it Iron Man 1, 2, or 3? Comment down below and let me know. And also just let me know in general what you thought about Iron Man 3 down in the comment section below. Guys, Phase 2 has just begun, and I'm going to be back soon talking more MCU movies. If you'd like to join me for that ride, I welcome you to do so, and I'd love for you to do so we can talk about these movies together, leading all the way up to Avengers Endgame. Once again, guys, my name's Zachary Milne. Thanks for talking movies with me, and I hope you have yourself a great day.